Great, wonderful. Welcome everyone to our November, I think this is our final full board meeting of the year where we're going to discuss the final report, and we have a few other matters of business today, in particularly election of co-chairs for the board for next year, and also our usual updates from the Department of Justice. So why don't we just get started? So in terms of, or why don't we start? Can we have the board members, everyone please introduce yourself? I guess I'll start. I'm Steve Raphael, professor at the Goldman School of Public Policy, UC Berkeley, and the gubernatorial appointee. And how about I kick it over to my co-chair, Melanie?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Melanie Ochoa. I'm Director of Police Practices at ACLU of Southern California, and I am an AG appointee. And I will kick it to Angela Sierra.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Angela Sierra. I'm a Deputy Attorney General in the California Department of Justice, and I'm the Attorney General's designee on the board. I will kick it over to Andrea Guerrero.
Good morning, buenos dias. I am Andrea Guerrero, and I'm the Executive Director of Alliance San Diego. And I will kick it over to Manji.
Hi, this is Manju Kulkarni. I am Executive Director of AAPI Equity Alliance and co-founder of Stop AAPI Hate, and I was appointed by Speaker Anthony Rendon. I will kick it over to Cha.
Good morning, everyone. Cha Bang, Deputy Director for AAPI Specific Empowerment, and I'm also an AG appointee. I'm going to pass it over to Pastor Kennedy.
Hi, Brian Kennedy. I pastor Mount Zion Church of Ontario down here in beautiful SoCal. And I can't see Angela, did you go already?
I did, yes.
Okay, so I can't see other folks. Maybe I'm not sure who else to call, so I can't.
Would you like someone to jump in, Pastor Kennedy?
Please.
Okay, I'll do it since I'm unmuted now. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm Lily Kajavi. I'm a professor of mathematics at Loyola Marymount University, also in beautiful Southern California, and an appointee of the Attorney General's office. I'll pass it on to Councilmember Prigden.
Good morning, everyone. Abdul Prigden. I'm the Chief of Police in San Leandro, California, and I am representing the California Police Chiefs Association. And I am in beautiful East Bay, California, and I will kick it over to Commissioner Ray.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Commissioner Amanda Ray with the California Highway Patrol, and I'm here in sunny Sacramento. Not too sunny over here, though, but I'm happy to be here, and I will kick it over to Rich Randolph.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rich Randolph. I am a formerly police corporal at the Colton Police Department in San Bernardino County, and now the police chief of Cuesta College in San Luis Obispo County, effective 3 weeks ago. I am appointed by PORAC, and glad to be here with all of
you. I can jump in. My name is William Armeline. I'm the director of the Human Rights Institute at San Jose State University and the criminal justice chair for the NAACP of San Jose and Silicon Valley. I'm a Senate appointee, and I will pass it on to whoever still needs to jump in.
I'm DJ Kreiner. I serve as a senior pastor of the St. Rest Baptist Church, as well as campus pastor of the Fresno Pacific University. I was appointed by the Attorney General's office. It's a pleasure to see you all, pleasure to be with you all today. And I'll pass it to whoever's left.
I can jump in. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ronaldo Villeda. I'm the Executive Director of Hoops for Justice, and I was appointed by the Attorney General. Thank you.
Board Member Kulkarni, did you go already? Oh, she did. Okay.
Yes, I did.
All right. I think that's everybody. Well, welcome, everyone. So our first agenda item is to review and approve the minutes from October 12th, 2022. So why don't we take a few minutes to review, and if someone would like to offer amendments, we can entertain that, or if somebody wants to offer a motion to approve, we can do that too.
I'll make a motion for us to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, with a motion approved in a second, I guess all in favor, aye, or raise your hand, I guess. Does that work?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so our minutes are approved then. Okay. The next item on our agenda is an update from the Department of Justice.
Good morning, everyone. This is Allison Elgart from the Department of Justice. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to cover a few update items for all of you. The first update that I wanted to give is that Sheriff Ayub, who was not able to join today, but Sheriff Ayub is actually retiring and therefore resigning from the board. So we wanted to make sure to thank him for his service, even though he wasn't able to join today, but he served as co-chair of the Calls for Service subcommittee and served as a member of the board for several years. So we are grateful for his service and wish him well in retirement. So we wanted to let all of you know that. The next update is that we are, as we discussed at the last board meeting, we are going to do a legislative briefing on the report, and Andrea Guerrero and Melanie Ochoa will represent the board at that legislative briefing, which we have now scheduled for December 13th. So we will, we will send to the legislators ahead of time. We will send them the drafts that we have sent you all of the executive summary and the quick back. And so we can discuss, those and the full report with them and what the data is showing. So that's scheduled for about 2 weeks from now. So we wanted to let you all know that's happening. And then the other thing we wanted to related to that last year the board voted to send the report to the legislators and to the Post Commission with transmittal letters from the co-chairs. So the board sent the full report to the legislators and Post Commission, and you all voted to do that last year. And what we also did was we took out the best practices and recommendation document. We took out the specific recommendations that you all had made for the legislature, and then also the specific recommendations that you all had made for Post. So we just wanted to raise that again. If you all did want to do that again, just to keep in mind, that's how we don't think, since we did it last year, we don't think we need to vote on it, but it's something you all could discuss this year if that is something you'd like to do again. You can also vote to do that as part of your approval of the report. So today we are going to discuss for the last time the 2023 report that will get published on January 1st. We will also, and when we get to the board discussion, we can walk through the executive summary with all of you, since we know that got sent out to you late and you may not have had a chance to read it. So we can walk through that with you. It's basically just taking what we thought were the highlights from the report, but we're happy to hear from all of you if you have any feedback on that. And we can also walk through the mock-up of the quick facts that we sent to all of you. And today is really the last chance for the board to discuss and make any substantive changes. After that, what we all hope you will do at the end of the meeting is vote to approve the report. And what that usually means is that you vote to, give your proxy and entrust in the co-chairs the final review of the report. If we do wordsmithing, just to ensure that the voice of the board is all of your perspectives. So we'll be asking you all to vote on the report and then give the co-chairs your proxy to give a final review. But if you do have substantive changes, we need to discuss them during the meeting today to make sure that everyone, can come about them before you vote to approve the report. Because after this, it will be more, wordsmithing, polishing things up, making sure, changing the wording to make something read better, but if anything in terms of specific substantive changes, like if you wanted to change, if you didn't like a scenario or an example that was used, that's something that you should bring up during this meeting, since this will be the last chance for the board to discuss. So that's really what the meeting will be devoted to today. Does anyone have any questions about any of that before we give you a few more updates? Angela, it looks like.
Yes, I just have a quick question regarding last year sending the report to the members of the legislature with the cover letters. Just based on that experience, is there anything in addition or differently that you or DOJ would recommend?
I don't think there's anything different. I think the question is whether, since we are going to have a legislative briefing, whether you all still would like to send a transmittal letter with the final report to the legislature. So it's really up to you all whether you think that would be a helpful additional step. Obviously, the report won't be finalized at the briefing on December 13th, though it will be fairly close to final. But those letters would go out in January once the report has been finally published and made public, and the media and everyone else has gotten to see it. And so that's when we sent the letters out last year. So if you all would like to do that again, we're happy to do that. We just wanted to raise that you did vote to do that last year. So if you did want to do it again, we just want to make sure we know before we leave the meeting today that that's what you all would like. But I don't think anything different. I know the board has made recommendations specifically in terms of the post commission. So if you all want the letter sent to post as well, then the letter would just come from the co-chairs, and then we would include the report with the letter or the executive summary.
I see. Thank you.
And then I saw Manju, I think, had a hand up.
Yes. So do I understand correctly that we removed the recommendations? Is that what you were saying, Allison, in the version that was sent? And if you can remind me why we did that?
So we didn't, sorry, to clarify. So what we did last year was we did a pullout section on best practices and recommendations taken from the report. And so what we did when we sent the letter to the legislature was we pulled out the ones that were specific to the legislature and sent that to them with the transmittal letter. And a link, hyperlinking in the letter, a link to where the report is posted on the RIPA board's website. So we sent them the recommendations that were specific to the legislature. We did the same thing with the post commission. So that's what we just pulled out the ones that the board made that were specific to those entities and sent those directly to them with links in the letter to the executive summary and the report.
I see. Thank you. That helps.
Any other questions? Okay, the last thing I wanted to cover was that Open Justice, as you all know, the data from the RIPA data that was collected and a lot of other data that gets submitted to DOJ is posted on Open Justice. And so we wanted to update you. The website has been down and we are still fulfilling data requests. We're treating any data requests for data that's posted on Open Justice. We're basically treating those as Public Record Act requests. So the data is still being sent to anyone who requests it. And we do hope that the RIPA data gets posted on Open Justice soon. So we don't have a date certain that the website will be back up, but we're hoping that it will be very soon and that the RIPA data can get posted there as soon as possible. So we just wanted to update all of you on that. But the data is still being sent by DOJ to anyone who is requesting it.
Allison, can I ask a question? Is it possible, and perhaps it's there already, but is there instructions on the RIPA data webpage on how to request the data from DOJ?
I believe there are, because the data connects to the Open Justice website, but we can confirm that. And make sure that there's something directing people to Open Justice. And when you get to Open Justice, there are instructions on how to request data when you do go to the website.
Yeah, there is something that says where to request that data on the website.
Okay, great. So if there are no further questions, I think next on our agenda is the board discussion of the 2023 RIPA report. And
Steve,
if I heard,
we still have more DOJ updates.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's
All
okay.
right. Yeah.
At first, I did see that member Randolph had a question in the chat about how Andrea and Melanie were chosen to give the presentation to the legislature. And we just asked everybody at the last board meeting who was interested, and they were the two people that volunteered. They were the only ones who volunteered. So we thank you. We thank you both for that. And that's how that came about. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nancy Beninati. I'm a supervising deputy attorney general in the civil rights enforcement section. It's really great to be here for what is my 6th sign off on an annual RIPA report. Sign off day is always exciting because that means we're getting near the final release of the report. And that's one of the things that I did want to talk to you all about, and that is the media. The DOJ has and will be, responsible for doing all of the media, and we are planning on, having the report completed by the deadline of January 1st, and then DOJ will do a press release and publicize that the first, week of January. So, if we do it during the holidays, it will just get lost. And I always cross my fingers because I'm never 100% sure that, every, period and comma and everything is in the report at the end of the month. So it gives us just a couple more days. Also, if, you get inquiries from the press, many members of the press will reach out to individual board members. We're happy to have you comment on behalf of the board, but just, friendly reminder that it's, you are representing the board in that capacity. And, generally it's easier to stick to the report. If you are talking on behalf of the board, then, we appreciate that you speak with the voice of the board. And then, if you do, want to speak to the press about the report, just let us know so that we can, keep track of who is requesting what. But if you don't want to speak to the press, you can also contact us if you're not comfortable doing that. And generally, we refer those to the co-chairs, and they will, sit for an interview or speak with the members of the press. So that's that on that. And I can take questions. I'll just take questions at the end because I'm going to also just give you a quick update on the regulations. So as we talked about last board meeting, AB 2773 amended Government Code 12525.5, which is the data collection statute of RIPA, and it added the reason, a new data element, which is the reason given to the person stopped for this at the time of the stop. And so we have done our research within DOJ and believe that we will need to, go through a formal rulemaking process, that we cannot do what they call the code 100, which is an easy process in order to get that implemented into the regulations and get it implemented into the data collection. And so Tanya Koshi, who is returned from her leave, and we're glad to have her back, who did the last rulemaking, will spearhead this rulemaking. Our goal is to get something out as soon as possible. We're working it up right now. We plan on workshopping that with the board, and we'll likely be needing to set a board meeting either in late February or early March so that we can have the board weigh in on that process. And so we are thinking that it will, we are crafting, data, what we call the big question that's in the statute is the data element, and then the little check the boxes underneath are the data values. So we'll be crafting those data values and then seeking the board's input on those, after we get that done in the probably, late winter or early spring. So please let me know if you guys have any questions about that. We've all been through the rulemaking, so I guess it's probably pretty straightforward for you all now, but happy to answer any questions. Oh, Manju has a question.
Yes, I actually, Nancy, have a question about the media piece. Can you explain a little bit more in terms of the rollout? And are there authorized spokespeople from DOJ or the board, our co-chairs? What media outlets will be getting it? And would there be any talking points offered to the board? Should we get any media calls, or if we get them, should we share that information and prep with you all before taking the calls? I know those are a lot of questions, but yeah, if you could answer those, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So the rollout, the DOJ will send the press release out to its network, its normal network, which is a very vast and widespread network. Our civil rights enforcement section has also put together a network of advocates and people that have participated in RIPA. We also have our listserv that we send all of the notices to, so we will push it out through there as well. In that we haven't had problems with the press picking up on the story in the past, so that happens. We also have send it out to the legislature as well, and have a wide network that we it's all electronic, so we're not sending any hard copy papers anywhere, so it's pretty easy to push out. I don't know if our office will do social media. Sometimes they do, and so that's another possible avenue. I don't know how people feel about Twitter these days, but then in terms of like speaking to the press, we don't prepare questions. I think Steve had some good advice that I'll ask him to share in a second. But, you know, I would just recommend, you know, looking at the quick facts and the executive summary. And then by that time, you know, the report is done, we'll have that best practices recommendations pull out. You know, those are really, you know, key documents to take a look at. I think generally those are you know, some of the things that the media likes to look at as well, which is one of the reasons why we prepare them, because, you know, the report is hundreds of pages long, and these kind of pull things that are in the report out and highlight them. So and in terms of like just letting us know is great. Like, you know, that you're, you know, that you've been approached, who you've been approached by, and that you're going to participate. If you have been approached and you're not interested in participating, you know, again, just let us know and we can find somebody else to do that outreach. And we also always encourage, you know, every board member to send it out to their networks as well, which I know you always do, and it's fantastic. But, you know, we're just, the more it gets sent out, the better. I don't know if that answered all your questions, Manju, but I think Steve had some good advice yesterday, if you wouldn't mind sharing it.
Sure. Just from having spoke to media in the past about empirical work, I think the executive summary is very helpful because there are patterns that are highlighted that are, you know, the main findings from the report. And I think sticking to those and knowing, you know, consulting them before speaking to the press, I think is helpful. And that way you could reference specific figures. I think a lot of times, at least when I talk to the press, sometimes there's confusion about what things mean. So, you know, we're all familiar from being on the board for many years with the findings and how they're presented. And it could be something like, what does it mean, the weighted average of California population, to what is a warning, what's a citation, you know, what's an infraction, what's a misdemeanor. And I think helping clarify that information really serves a public role. And I often, you know, when I'm in media interviews, people always ask me the question, well, what was surprising? And I'm never sure that I have a good answer to that, but I'm always ready for that question to come up. And that seems to come up a lot when you talk to the press. So I think that's the way I would prepare for it if you're going to talk to someone. Just review the report and try to say what the facts say.
I'll just thank you for that, Steve. I think that was very helpful, and he shared some of those the other day. And I just wanted to add, addition to your point about the clarifying terms. Often people think they know what we're talking about. They don't even know to ask that they didn't understand something. So some of the terms that are the most jargony, like consent only or no action, like what does that substantively mean? It might be useful to just give a definition even when you first talk about it, rather than waiting for them to ask. Just some of those, to keep some of those things in mind that we've already talked about in the report. We've already talked about in these contexts about terms that really need to be defined for folks in the report, to kind of keep those terms in mind when you talk to media and preemptively define them for them.
Thank you. That's helpful. And if I could just add, I mean, I think while the facts are quite clear, I think we may disagree about the implications. And so I think that's sort of the question I had, which is, what does this tell us about the way in which communities of color are impacted and or law enforcement actions against them?
Perhaps maybe DOJ, if you could help us out here. I mean, I think we all have differences of opinion, and, you know, for any set of facts, there are multiple, I guess, theories and stories that are consistent with those facts. I mean, if I'm going to speak on behalf of the board, I'd probably just stick to what the numbers say. But I don't, you know, we're all also private citizens and have a right to say what we want to say. But perhaps, Nancy, could you help us out on that point? Maybe
Sure.
When you say we speak with the voice of the board, perhaps we should elaborate that. on that a little bit.
Sure. So, the report is voted on, the contents of the report is voted on by the entire board, and no action of the board can be taken, no recommendation can be made unless a majority of the board agrees. I suppose you could say the report says X and I completely disagree with it. And I voted as such during the board meeting. That's, obviously that's one way. But, I think the broader issue is just to make clear that if you're saying something, you're either saying it in your individual capacity as opposed to on behalf of the board as a whole. And so, things that the board has voted on, things that is the board position. You are entitled to your own opinions, but it just needs to be made clear. And I don't think we've had an issue with this ever in the past. I think the board and those have spoken to the media have been respectful of the colleagues, the work, and really there is the main points. I think the big items are by and large there is an overwhelming consensus on what is happening. I haven't voted on the report yet, but you have voted on subsequent versions, and this board's goal is to eliminate racial and identity profiling, and you all have that in mind when you're speaking with the press or whomever.
Nancy, I just wanted to clarify or get some like decisional clarification, because I understood Manju's question as not disagreeing with anything in the report, not saying like I disagree with this finding or I disagree with this conclusion, but when reporters ultimately ask you something that's not in the report, right? Like, so what does that mean for X? Or what's next? Or what would you prioritize? Like, there's lots of questions that kind of come up in the context of an interview that we could give answers that wouldn't be inconsistent with the report, but it just goes beyond the four corners of the report. And kind of, at that point, do you say, well, as a board, we haven't voted on X or we haven't discussed X, but from where I sit as member of blah, I think this is the answer. Is that maybe the best way to kind of navigate that?
I think that's a great example. And again, there are some recommendations in the report already that the board has said we hope to do these things in future reports. So, if you're asked those kinds of questions, you say we plan on, the report already contains some things that we hope to work on. And, I hope to bring up some additional points, X, Y, or Z to the board. Very, very well done,
Melanie. Thank you, Melanie. That's exactly what I was getting at. And, in my outside work, we speak with, reporters probably at least once a week. And I would say that those are exactly the type of questions. And that's why, talking points can be helpful so that, we share what is the significance of the work, but also stay within the four corners of what the report says.
Yeah, and Manju, I think when you look at the executive summary and you look at the quick facts and even the best practice, right? Those are the talking points, right? Those three documents. I mean, the executive summary is a little on the long side, but you can always flip through it during the interview or whatever. But I think those are definitely your talking points, because as the board, again, you will be voting on what they look like today and we'll be getting your feedback, but those are the highlights of what is in the report. And so I think it makes it a little bit simpler. Basically, if we prepared talking points, we'd just be duplicating what's already in those three documents. Plus, if you talk to the press once a week, you're going to be awesome.
Okay, if that's all of the DOJ comments, Is that all the DOJ updates, Nancy? Okay, then we
It
can
is.
move
Thank
on.
you.
Okay, thank you. And not hearing any further comments from board members, we can move on to the next item, which is the discussion of the report, which I assume, because that's the only kind of substantive item, that means that's inclusive of the quick fact sheet and the executive summary and all of that. So for all of the things that we've talked about. So if anyone wants to jump in with comment, well, let me first say, getting to this point where we are right now was just a Herculean effort by the DOJ, and I appreciate, so I think everyone here actually, because I already see people nodding, like appreciate the effort for all the folks that took so many hours to research this, to do the analyses, and to really get some very thoughtful recommendations and analysis of historical facts, and really add, I think, a lot to the discussion of racial bias in California, racial identity bias in California. So I really appreciate that. And so we're nearing the finish line. And so I want to just open up the floor to any folks who have comments on any of those documents that they want to share.
I'll offer just a summary set of comments. I think the quick facts document is incredibly concise and does a really good job of summarizing the three main points with regards to just the general demographics of stops, the differential outcomes, and then the youth outcomes, which is new this year. So I was reading through all of these things this morning, and I thought, wow, we've been talking about this for many months now, and this was a very clear presentation of those results, and the visuals are easy to understand, and I just want to comment on. I think DOJ has done a great job on these.
Thanks, Steve. I think Andrea, I saw the hand raised.
Yes, I also commend DOJ staff for putting this together. It's a lot of information. I think it will inform policy discussions long into the future. I had a question on the executive summary on page 3, which begins with a bullet point. The most commonly reported reason for a stop across all racial ethnic groups. The second sentence of that bullet point on page 3 of the executive summary is a little confusing to me, and I don't know if it needs more context or if I just want to make sure that the numbers are correct, because it says Black individuals had the highest proportion of their stops reported as reasonable suspicion, 16.2%, and the lowest proportion of their stops reported as traffic violations, 80.5%. So the highest corresponds to a low number and the lowest corresponds to a high number. And it may be that those numbers are correct because you're talking about relative to something else. But it was just a little confusing in the reading of it. So it might warrant, if these numbers are correct, it just might warrant a little bit more context.
Thank you, Andrea. Did you have other comments, or did you want DOJ to?
No, that's it. It's not a substantive comment. It's just please make sure that information is correct, and if there's a way to clarify it a little bit more, provide some context so it's not a cognitive disconnect between the language of highest and lowest and the numbers that are used. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Gurrow. This is Kevin from the Research Center. Yes, so that content's taken from the draft of the report, but it looks like somewhere along the line in making it more brief for the executive summary, that statement about relative to other racial and ethnic groups Black individuals had a lower proportion. So we can add that language back in somewhere it got edited out. So yes, the numbers are correct, but that context about when we're saying highest and lowest, we're talking about relative to other groups is not there anymore. So we'll be sure to add that back in before it's finalized. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you, Kevin. And Angela had her hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to echo many of the comments already made. As you all know, I had been not on the board this last year, so I have not been involved in the hard work you all have been doing this year, and just rejoined the board in October. And I am just so impressed with this report. I am really blown away by it, all the hard work from all of you and all the subcommittees, all the hard work of the DOJ staff, you know, the hard work for the members of the public who have been listening and asking questions and commenting. So I think it's just fabulous. And I was involved and I was on the board when we first started. And this was even before any data was collected. Our regulations had not yet been enacted. And it's just so satisfying to see where we are today and to see how comprehensive our data is, how comprehensive the topics that you all have covered this year. The analysis of both the data and the research that's out there and what's going on in other jurisdictions is just really amazing. And I think that you all, DOJ and the board and the public, have put us in a really great position to continue doing this work. And just, you know, seeing what we can do with data-driven policy. You know, that we really have something very concrete to look at and further discuss, like we said, what the implications are, what the reasons are, and what, you know, some of the policies that could be most helpful to our state. So anyway, I just want to commend all of you and DOJ for this, because I just think it's really fantastic. So I'm excited to be joining you for this next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Are there any more comments? If I can jump into with mine, if folks.
I
also
want to thank the team for the thoughtfulness put into this report. Just very thoughtful, thinking about the public and how to help the public understand a very comprehensive report. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Kennedy. Go ahead, Lily. You're muted, Lily.
Thank you, Melanie. Apologies for that. I have to leave early today. I wanted to just chime in to say that the report is substantial. I want to thank DOJ for the tremendous work. Regardless of whatever comments, suggestions come through, I want to urge the board to approve the report this year as we move forward. And so although I've got to sign off, I just wanted to share my strong support for the report overall. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I can go ahead and give some of my comments and real quickly. A question about the quick facts, and then the report on pages 56, 57 mentions percent of bicycle stops. So it says a comment, bicycle stops made up a larger percentage of stops. But I thought that, and maybe I'm just misremembering our discussion, but I thought that the data didn't actually tell us which stops were conducted on a bicycle. They may have violations that were bike related, but I just want to make sure that we're accurately saying or accurately describing whatever the data point is for that piece. Because that, at least from other stop data, there could be other reasons for stops on a bike that don't end up in a bicycle violation. Kevin, were you about to jump in?
Yes, I can respond to this. Yes, so that's a good point that you make there. So it seems like some of the language, maybe through the revision process, was changed to make it shorter and say bicycle stops. But when what's being presented in that section of the report are stops for bicycle-related violations. And so what we can take back is to go through that section and ensure that any time that we refer to something as a bicycle stop, that gets changed to stops for bicycle-related violations, which is a wordier way to say it, but you're right, the language is more precise because currently, and this will change in the future, right, 2024, when the new regulations go into effect, there will be a way to distinguish bicycle stops from other stops, but the only way to do that currently is to just look at stops that are for offense codes that are related to bicycles and bicyclists. So yes, we're not able to identify 100% of stops where the person was on a bicycle or in possession of a bicycle. What we're talking about here is just when the offense they were stopped for was related to a bicycle. So we can go through and clean up some of that language in the next round of revisions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And so I had a question of whether there was a way to fit in or combine another graphic, the data point regarding the percentage of for both the quick facts, and I think this information is also not an executive summary, the data point regarding the percentage of stops that are self-initiated versus the ones that are in response to calls for service. And I didn't know if that could maybe, I suggest maybe putting it in the text that goes along with the reason for stop by age group or something somewhere else, because I think that's a big, often surprising number when people see that. So I think that should be included if we can. Just a minor point on the discussion of search, curbside, and or patrol car detainment for by age. The text does not seem like it should display the percentages as though they were ranges. They should be and rather than ranges, like 36.2% of the time and 44% of the time versus the range there. That was in the quick facts. And also, if there was a place to define what a consent-only search is, that's a phrase that's used throughout, but I think we should try to clarify what it means at the very beginning on the quick facts sheet. On the executive summary, just explaining / reconciling the kind of no action discussion. The quick facts explain that no action likely means that stopped individuals were not engaged in any criminal activity. That language is not present in the executive summary, but I think it's when we talked about like understanding what that means in our prior conversations, I thought we landed on that being an important kind of narrative piece for folks to really interpret that data. So I think that should be included in the executive summary. And then I also wonder if there's a way to reconcile the facts that Black and Latina folks have the highest stop rates for certain actions like search, curbside detention, handcuffing, order to exit vehicle, and also the highest no action rate. So I feel like without some kind of articulation, that's a little bit confusing to the reader. And I don't know if there's a narrative that makes it clear that those two are not conflicting. Something like they're both more likely to be subject to invasive search actions and also most likely to be stopped and released without any action being taken, such as ticket, arrest, or warning, suggesting that those who are stopped were not likely to have been engaged in any criminal activity. So that kind of combines, it doesn't just ignore the fact that those two things kind of seem initially conflicting and kind of puts them in a narrative, and it uses some of the language we already have. And then just as like a flag, we use Latina with X in the text and Hispanic in the graphs. And I know, well, I believe Hispanic is the actual term on the like regulations, but if we're going to refer to it as Latina in the text, it seems like that should be the same for both. I'm not sure why that's different. And then just in the executive summary, I didn't know if there was a way to include some of the info regarding the treatment of folks perceived to have disabilities, even though I know it's a really small percentage, but just given how out of proportion the number of actions that are taken against those with disabilities, that I think is a really important piece of data, especially when you combine that with information that talks about like folks who are more likely to be killed by police, uses of force, et cetera. So I think that if we have space for that in the executive summary, just include that line about some of their actions, I think that'd be helpful. Again, defining consent search. And then I did this little tiny thing. I didn't know if there was going to be numbering added to the executive summary, but if there wasn't, I thought that might be good to have those headings with the headings. And And then pages 16 through 19 in the report and the stories of bias by proxy. I wonder if it would be useful to list the race of the individuals who had police called on them, particularly as that discussion leads into a discussion of the Colorado State University incident that specifically mentions that they are not Black or Latina. So it might need some context of like who the preceding stories were about. And just the last point was page 63, the figure regarding the use of force rates. I know there are a super small percentage of the overall stops, but I wondered if there was a more useful number to have on the x-axis that would help better kind of distinguish between them, because it's like 0.00014 and 0.00 like 2, I think is like the spread there. It's just a very small number. So I wonder if there's a way to put a different value on the x-axis that provided some other kind of information or context. So look, that's all my nits. Great job. I don't know if there's other folks on the board that have comments before we get to public comment.
Sorry, Melanie, this is Allison Elgart. A quick question. There is actually, I did want to clarify, there is the statement, the same statement that was in the quick facts about indicating that the stopped individuals were not engaged in criminal activity is in the executive summary. But I understood your point about comparing that to citations. It's actually on page 4 after the graph of actions taken. It's in the text there. But I did want to just clarify also what you said about ranges, because I didn't quite catch that. Just wanted to make sure I understood your point about the ranges.
So I think on quick facts, let me see if I pull my notes. The graphic, I think the graphic on page 4, where it says the heading is search, curbside patrol, detainment, and handcuff rates by age and racial and ethnic groups. And then in the text, it says Black adolescents, 10 to 14, and 15 to 17-year-olds. So you're comparing those 2 points, were detained. And this is 36.2% of the time to 44.5% of the time. But I think those are just the 2 data points. So it should be 36.2 for the 10.14, 10 to 14 age, and 44.5, because that's what's for the 15.7 to 17 range. Does that make sense?
Yes. Now I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
Sorry, I think, Rich, did I see your hand raised before? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Miss Melanie. First of all, DOJ staff, great report. The stats, you guys really put some work into it. However, I do have some concerns I do want to bring up, just like Miss Melody did. And obviously, I'm going to look at it from the lens through what I do. As we prepare for our vote today, I want to come back to how we define success. And because success means putting forward neutral and accurate information. And this fails to do that. I went through the report. I did it through Thanksgiving break. I did it during my move. And if success means wrapping numbers around a predetermined notion that racial bias exists to lend that notion to some air of credibility, this accomplishes that well. So if this board really feels like we could all stand behind this report without doing some more digesting and getting a third party to look at this and publicly and honestly saying that's fair representation of racial bias in policing, then you should move forward. But as one of the only 3 law enforcement professionals on this board, one of them not being here today, and as someone who has a pretty thorough understanding of how racial bias can influence policing outcomes, because I've experienced it off duty and I've experienced it on duty and in this state, I cannot in good faith consciously stand behind this report. I want this organization to be successful, but success for a non-partisan advisory body necessarily demands neutrality. I just don't think this report does this. This is no offense to the DOJ staff. They were great. They were on it, and the numbers are there. But I think what this is also going to do is just paint more of a negative picture on the men and women that work hard every day, just based on your first tier. You haven't even gotten into the rest of the tiers. And I don't think it's a rightful representation. Thank you.
Rich, it would be helpful maybe if you identified some of the actual substantive
Sure.
problems that you
I'm
saw.
not gonna be able to get as detailed as you because you're like on it. So sorry. But one of them that does stand out, which just bothers me so much, is the report cites several print and TV news articles as sources, but fails to provide a thorough literature review. Cherry picking news articles, well, as what most importantly, and I know I've already said this before, outside the state, racial discrimination of law enforcement outside the state being brought into this report is unacceptable. And I've talked to other assembly personnel, and they have agreed. And those sources are hardly the standard we should be striving to achieve. That's one that just, sorry, Melanie, it's not like all detailed like you have it down, but that's like a main sticking point for me. Also, a lot of the verbiage, we can't speak for the mindset of what every police officer does out there. It's the stats all have got, the numbers are there, but when the numbers are thrown in with, I'll just use this as a court case. Okay, if I go into court and I testify saying chances are, traditionally speaking, this particular race is going to be on parole or probation. I'm speculating. There's a lot of speculations in this report surrounded by numbers. That was all.
Andrea, I noticed your hand if you want to comment.
Yes, thank you so much, Sister Moderator, for allowing me to speak. I really just wanted to.
Hold on, Mr. Greiner, that we're still doing board comments right now, but we'll move to public comment right after.
Yes.
I'm
Thank
on
you.
the
It took
board.
me a moment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is
Yeah,
Andrea. It took me a moment to get off of mute. Thank you for
We'll go to you right after, okay? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing me, Board Chair Ochoa. And I wanted to just comment on the reflection that Board Member Randolph had. I think we're all deeply invested in getting a report out that informs a conversation about policy. And as someone who's been on, the board since inception and has, endeavored to work with law enforcement leadership to put reports out year after year that provide the information for the policy debate. I think this is a sound report. It's chock full of data and information. It provides references and sources. The data is the data. The anecdotes are the anecdotes. If there are other anecdotes that could have or should have been brought in, the opportunity to suggest those or bring those in were in the committee meetings. And so I think that, going forward, certainly those who feel like there are particular anecdotes that should complement the data, should endeavor to to make the effort to bring those to the attention of the DOJ staff. But I think the DOJ staff has done an outstanding job of providing data, analyzing the data. That is the principal purpose of this report, and also providing expert information and resources and anecdotal information, the plural of which is not data, but it is a way to bring to life the data. And the time has passed for us to move into an independent review or any such thing. I think the work of this board is to bring to bear the information that brings the data to life, and we have done that. We have done that, and the DOJ has done what they were charged to do. I'm proud of the report, and I think it will serve us well. We are not the people who are making policy. We are making suggestions at times based on the data, but this is really a conversation that will be had in the legislative realm.
Thank you, Andrea. And I apologize, Mr. Greiner. Please.
No problem. It just feels good for once for no one to know, who I am. So I'm grateful. Thank you, Ms. Melanie. I appreciate you. I really do, sis. But I definitely wanted to chime in and give my kudos to our DOJ staff. I mean, the report is so detailed and it's so transparent. And the time that you all took in order to do so, time away from your families, your normal day-to-day activities, is just incredible to see the amount of effort you have put into this report. I applaud you. I would dare not omit my brother, my fellow board member, from his sentiments as well. As clergy, as a person who's a part of many boards, definitely say, brother, I hear you, and we definitely see you, and definitely want to make sure that your statements are not overlooked or overshadowed by anything. But I do want, at the end of the day, for our staff to know how appreciative and how grateful I am for this report, and grateful that it was done the way it was. Just an amazing job, and I applaud you. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
Yes. Thank you. I think the data that's been collected is, incredibly useful information, not just for the conversation, this uncomfortable conversation that has needed to be had for hundreds of years, but also, just for the way kind of legislation is moving in the criminal justice system, the Racial Justice Act and things like that, that this information is incredibly useful because it's data that's coming directly from the law enforcement agencies themselves. And while, the conversation of implicit bias and its role in how we conduct ourselves on a day-to-day is not just I don't think this report just focuses, it doesn't have to just focus on law enforcement and any shortcomings on implicit bias in law enforcement. It shows the trend of why we as a nation, why we have the stereotypes we have. Because this is the way in which we've been trained to evaluate and to survive and to make decisions as humans out in the world. So I think the fact that it is causing discomfort and that it is causing some, it is causing there to be an opposition means it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And it's not just, towing this, norm line that we've had for many years. And when I first started in public defense work, it was in the early 2000s. And during that time, the trend was that, law enforcement, without any evaluating whether the policies and the procedures or the people that were being trained were understanding, what they were being indoctrinated into. And finally, where you have numbers and trends that are going across many different agencies in the same way, at least it opens up the conversation, it opens up the thought of, and so, while I absolutely understand Board Member Randolph's sentiment about it, I think that his sentiment is directly what we're trying to get from law enforcement, from people from the Department of Justice. We're trying to get that conversation going with these trends, and so I think it's a testament to how well the report is written and is done. That there's this struggle internally we all have with what this all means. But I don't think if we reflect on what it means, I don't think it just means one thing for law enforcement. I think it applies to us all. So that's kind of just what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Ms. Sierra?
There we go.
There.
Yes, no, I just wanted to comment. I too agree. This is a, really important conversation. And, I'm glad that all of us as board members be comfortable talking about this. And I just wanted to just note, from my perspective, again, coming in, relatively just less since October and reading this report, what really struck me about, and I thought it was a very thoughtful report, was that the way it was presented, it was very much in line of these are the disparities of the numbers, of the data. And which I think some of them were some of the disparities that we are seeing in this report, many of us thought that's what I would have expected to see. Some, it could be surprising, or at least some to say, okay, now this gives us more information to then move on to the next part of the conversation. And I think that's what this report is doing. To me, it wasn't reading, it doesn't read as much as, and these are all the causes and here's who's to blame. It's more of, as Taylor mentioned, kind of a conversation starter, so why is this happening? And what can be done. And even if we can't fully understand why this is happening, let's see if we can make some changes, because the report also does a great job, I think, from my perspective, in demonstrating how these disparities impact our society, regardless of the reasons. So I had this kind of a different read of this report than board member Randolph, because I kind of felt, again, that it was really focused on, let's mainly talk about the disparities in the numbers. And now, there's going to be many more conversations about policies and further thinking through why this is occurring. So yeah, I very much appreciated, that approach in this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Ray?
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to ask some clarification from DOJ, and I'm on page 9 of the executive summary under number 2, under where the report talks about various models that are available. And my concern is I just want to know what the thinking behind where we talk about the board recommends that the legislature evaluate moving to a probable cause standard for stops that the RIPA data show have a statistical, we read the rest. But my concern is on there is that I know my law enforcement, my agency does, and I'm sure most do have a probable cause standard already. So I just want to make sure that that's spelled out correctly, because we all we follow a probable cause standard with regard to all stops. So just curious from DOJ standpoint what that is referencing. And then I have one more quick reply, one more quick comment after that.
Does someone from DOJ want to jump in? Sorry, Andrea, did you want to respond to that question?
Yes, if I could, as the co-chair of the policy committee, because that language was developed in the policy committee. We appreciate the law enforcement agencies that follow a probable cause standard for stops, but not all do. And in fact, the concern about the pretext stops or the consensual searches or the questioning about status, those are all concerns arising from the fact that law enforcement is not using probable cause as a precursor to a stop and subsequent questioning and searches. So thank you, Commissioner Ray. If CHP is in fact following that standard, we appreciate that, but not all are, and that's why that's in there.
Okay, and that's kind of what I thought, but I just wanted to clarify that to make sure that it's that there are some that do follow that standard already, and I think that that's something could be noted as well. And then also I had a concern or question about I know both, Board Member Guerrero and also I think earlier, I forgot, Dr. Raphael also talked about having a balance. And I think that's also what Rich was talking about, was having a balance with regard to, we're talking about a lot of the studies that are listed, they show the negative effects of traffic stops, but there's nothing that shows some of the benefits of traffic enforcement as well. And I know at a prior board subcommittee meetings that Dr. Raphael actually brought up, I think it was the American Economic Association study that he talked about, that actually talked about, it says here that it indicated that there was a decrease in enforcement and is associated with a significant increase in injuries and fatalities. So it actually, there's some, so I think it should be a balance. There should be studies that are listed as well that shows that there is positive effects with traffic enforcement. And those were discussed during prior subcommittee meetings, but they are not listed in the report. I just think that having a balance would be, it's kind of, I think it speaks to what everyone is talking about, is like actually making sure all the facts are listed and not just on one side. But also, I too want to thank and really commend everyone who put forth the work in this project, because I know it was a very heavy lift.
So Commissioner Ray, that is only speaking to pretext stops. It is not speaking to general, traffic safety stops. I don't know if that clarification, maybe it didn't come across, but that was what we were talking about there. So we're not saying that there's no benefit to, public safety stops. We're just saying that, and when looking at pretext stops, officers found that there was not a public safety aspect to it, i.e. stopping someone for a taillight when you're really looking for cocaine, right? So that's limited to those types of stops.
Okay, but remember, I think in those meetings, we also discussed the importance of even with a taillight stop. And I think I talked about that with regard to the California Highway Patrol specifically, when you talk about a taillight stop or you talk about a broken windshield and the safety component of that. And really that is something that we feel is extremely important with traffic safety and with the safety of the public. So I get that, but I'm just saying, I think that this is still, whether it's pretext stop or whether it's just a stop, it's still a traffic stop. So that I think we should still, it's still worth noting. Just my 2 cents.
Sorry, Steve, I lost track of who was commenting, but I think Steve had your hand raised next.
Well, I just had a 2-finger on this. I think the language did change from the original draft to emphasize that, focus on reevaluating stops that are not, where there's no public safety concern, but maybe adding language about, the reason why driving with a broken windshield might be dangerous, or somebody speeding. There are things that might create public safety concerns and injury that perhaps are not immediately obvious. And perhaps if we can just add a little context. And I'm not in a position to offer what those are. I've never enforced traffic, and I don't, I know speeding is dangerous, but other than that, I probably wouldn't know what the other things are. But we perhaps could contextualize a little bit more with a footnote or in the conversation following those recommendations to sort of note that, you don't have to be driving 100 miles an hour to be endangering someone else, and just balancing the conversation that way. So perhaps that's I don't know, Commissioner Ray, if that's what you're suggesting.
That is exactly what I'm suggesting, and would love to be a part of any of those conversations if I could be of assistance. But yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I think it balances the conversation for sure.
I think in terms of changing any content in the report, if you have proposed language, I think we need to actually do it now, because that would be substantive changes and we'd have to vote on that. So if you want to maybe think of some things that you might want to add, we can revisit it and vote on it. but I think per our process, we need to finalize that in the context of this meeting.
I have a suggestion, if I may. Because
Go ahead, Andrea.
where we left it in the policy committee was the reason why we didn't go further with the language was because we thought that a further conversation beyond this report, beyond this year, on what constitutes public safety was warranted. And so, because that's your concern, Commissioner Ray, right? Is what constitutes public safety, and we were not in a position to put any language down in the report out of the committee. So a suggestion here would be to put a footnote on the term public safety in the recommendation in that bullet, and in the footnote to note that the board recognizes that what is defined as public safety needs further examination, conversation, and review, or further examination and deliberation, and just leave it there. What do you think about that, Commissioner Ray, to acknowledge that that's a conversation that needs to be had and that we didn't have it?
I think that would be excellent, because I think that would give us the ability to actually come back and come up with something that I think would be beneficial to everyone, versus I don't want to really just throw something out there, a knee-jerk kind of comment, but I'd rather really give a thought-out comment in a discussion.
Right, and that would allow us, that could point to what we then do in the coming year, is really come up with some thinking around that would be helpful to all the stakeholders.
Yes, and thanks for bringing that back to my memory. I do remember that conversation.
Perhaps the probable cause should also be handled in a similar way, where it's beyond the scope of this report, but at least acknowledging that many agencies have a probable cause policy and many don't. And so maybe that's something to discuss next year as well.
I think on that piece, I think we already voted on the recommendation that it should be to the probable cause standard. I think it's definitely actually very helpful to include Commissioner Ray's point that CHP already has the standard, and so do other agencies within California, to demonstrate to the legislature that is, and local legislators, that that is a policy that already exists and is in practice. But I don't know that what would be the benefit of deferring, of removing that, and to rediscuss it next year.
Maybe not rediscuss it, but maybe acknowledge that several agencies have it. It is a problem, but several agencies have it, and those that don't have it, it creates problems, and that's what we're talking about.
So I think if I'm hearing you right, Pastor Kennedy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you're still endorsing that we include that as a recommendation, but want to acknowledge that some agencies have already adopted it, which I think is true for many of the recommendations that we probably have, right? Some agencies have already more stringent standards, or have policies against consent searches or pretext stops, which is something that we have actually talked about in the report, that even some California agencies have different policies with respect to those practices. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding your point.
I think you are understanding it, and I was just acknowledging our CHP chief on this, and also just to, in any way possible, because we are having issues recruiting law enforcement officials because of the blight that's been placed on the profession. Any opportunity we have to, to exalt the law enforcement community and encourage them, we should do it.
And of course, I want to thank Pastor Kennedy for that statement. And also, yes, I do think with the report, and I think that's the reason why my statement, I think is I would like to see it noted, is just because when the public reads this report, I think it's important for them to know that there are some agencies that have acknowledged it, but it's being said and have moved towards those standards or have had those standards as we have for many, many years, because we are in the midst of a big recruitment campaign. And really, I want people to realize that, we are your California Highway Patrol, and we really want to bring people into our department and want to have a department that is representative of the public we serve. So, which is why I think this is important and this board is important.
And I just want to check in with DOJ to see if we've talked about a few edits to the report. Now, the footnote that Board Member Guerrero recommended to respond to Board Member Ray's concern, and also the facts about the CHP and the probable cause standard. I believe those are the only two substantive changes we discussed. Just want to make sure that you have sufficient information on that to know kind of how to textually execute that, and that we can vote on that as part of the report when we get to the voting piece.
Yes, Melanie, I'm taking notes, and I have those two pieces. Is to leave the recommendation as it is, add the footnote regarding the work of public safety that will be discussed in the future, as Andreas discussed in the meeting, and then add something acknowledging that the CHP already uses a probable cause standard, and if I may, commending them for being leaders in that area. And so that we can vote on that now if you all want. Maybe that would be the easiest thing to do since we're on that topic. And if there's other things that we need to vote on later, we can address those as well.
And I'm sorry, I don't want me to be a pest, but I just want to make sure that we acknowledge, because there may be other agencies other than just the CHP that actually have the standard. So I wouldn't want to make it specific to us, because I think if there's other agencies that too, have it, it could be that there may be other California agencies that have it in addition, and that it's more broad, not just specific to us,
Sure.
That it recognizes other efforts of others.
Sure, just so that I'm clear, is it okay if we just say the CHP and other agencies have adopted a probable cause standard, or do you want us to go do additional research to identify agencies? Because I don't know, it would be an exhaustive list, and I'd prefer to keep it more broad.
I'll leave that up to the board. I'm okay either way.
Done. I see some hands raised, but I don't know if anyone wanted to respond to this particular question of Nancy's. Guerrero, yeah, you want to respond to this? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I think without having done a survey of agencies and their standards, I think the best way to proceed here would just be to acknowledge that some law enforcement agencies have stricter standards and others do not. And we can always survey that more methodically in the coming year. I think that would be the best way to handle that. But I wanted to respond also to what Commissioner Ray and Board Member Randolph were mentioning about just the view of law enforcement in general, and not wanting to come across in this report as as disparaging of the profession of law enforcement. I see in the report that we have as a placeholder, we just have a placeholder for an introduction and a conclusion. And in the past, that's where we have like laid out the stakes for what we're doing. And I know that when I was co-chair and with law enforcement leader as the other co-chair, that we worked together to draft language with the DOJ staff in the beginning and the end that recognized the shared interest of all the stakeholders, including law enforcement, in making California, law enforcement the most honorable, practicing the best practices and leading the way in addressing the questions around racial identity profiling. Not being afraid to hit this and bringing the public into a conversation informed by data. Anyways, you can look to the prior intros and conclusions of the last reports. There's been now 5, is that right? To lay that out. I think that would be a great place to do that.
I know board member, thank you, Andrea. Board member Pridgen, I thought had raised his hand and may have gotten off of the thing, but out of the queue. But did you have comments?
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair Ochoa. So again, I want to thank the Department of Justice and everyone on the call for their passion and perspective. It's all important in us working together to create a product that we can move forward with as a profession. And you know, when they mention balance, I think it's important, and this is not an indictment. You know, the data is what it is. We all know that improvement needs to be made, and it's not an indictment on our profession as a whole. And I think that local agencies can look at what they're doing and some of the recommendations that are in here. They can see whether or not they can be adopted in their local jurisdictions to have an impact. And having a unique perspective of having worked in another state where they were collecting racial profiling data back in 2001, I can tell you not a whole lot has changed in 20 years of collecting data. And so I hope California is different, and I hope we are able to use this data in a meaningful way to have an impact in the way we interact with members of our community who happen to be from different backgrounds, and not take offense to the data, because the data is not an indictment on a human being. It's just a reflection of the society that we live in and what could be unconsciously influencing us to do certain things. That's not an indictment on human beings. It's just human nature. And so how do we use this data at a local level to determine what is happening and what we can do to change the trajectory of our interactions so that we make for a safer community where people trust us, respect us, and view us as legitimate? And so I think along with that, there's an opportunity for balance. I know that might not be an opportunity for that in this particular report, but moving forward into next year, I know we discussed, you know, there are some promising practices that maybe some agencies are using. But let's also support that with data, because it can't just be anecdotes. There has to be some data to support these things are working. And here's what others might want to emulate if they want to have an impact in their communities. So I just appreciate the discussion and the conversation and the respectful nature of the dialogue, because we're all trying to move in the same direction. And we have unique perspectives based upon what we do, but we all want to get to the same place. And that's a safer California where everyone is treated fairly and equitably under the law. So that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Melanie, if I could, I was reminded, it's a long report and it's been a long time, but on page 110 of the actual report, there is a discussion of agencies that are using, probable cause, and there's this discussion about emerging policies and trends. So there is a discussion about, comparing what agencies are doing and policies and things that are being done, not just in California, but throughout the country.
Thank you, Nancy. I just want to also just interject in response to Board Member Pridgen and Board Member Randolph that the emphasis, there's nowhere in this report discusses the intent of officers. I think Board Member Randolph, you talked about not knowing the minds of the officers. There's nothing in this that talks about the minds of officers. It looks at the data as outcomes. And then I think the point of having a lot of these policy recommendations is to change the policies that result in this, so that we're not trying to just change the individual, actor, right? We see the data as relates to consent searches. It results in very biased outcomes that don't support kind of the practices of the stops, right? The patterns of the stops. So let's eliminate that thing, particularly when we see in other jurisdictions, they've eliminated that thing and it hasn't resulted in an uptick of, negative outcomes. So I think that precisely actually speaks to the concern that I thought you had about, not wanting to malign officers, right? It's data driven. It's looking at data from other jurisdictions where some of these things are already in practice and making recommendations that at the structural level, right? The individual officer doesn't make a decision as to whether or not the agency conducts consent searches. once it's there are different motivations to engage in those practices because of, you know, norms within the agency. So it's eliminating that piece of the discussion, right? Or the part of the piece of the puzzle by changing the structural practices at the agency level or at the state level so that it imposes it down on the agencies. So I think there's that. So I just want to emphasize that kind of that the report is data driven, and it seems like you agree with the data as being, you know, accurate. So I just wanted to emphasize that is kind of where those recommendations are coming from, the data. Steve or Board Member Raphael?
Okay, so I'll offer this article again, and I did note on page 72, I think. Let me see if I can find it real quick. There's a statement that reads, additionally, research indicates that one, state patrol traffic stops are not associated with reducing motor vehicle deaths, and there is not a significant association between increased stops and reduced risk of motor vehicle death. I don't, and you know, I don't mean to be difficult or anything, but I just, my reading of the research that I've seen over the years and people present in conferences is that, you know, when people drive faster, there's more death, and there's reduction in traffic enforcement, especially on highways. There's credible research to indicate that actually it can result in more deaths. So I just recommend that perhaps we cite, I just put an additional study in the chats, refereed in a major journal in the American Economic Association. And it's not the only thing, clearly, but there's citations in there. And I don't think the research would lead to that conclusion if we had a real full review of what the research on traffic safety and speeding and fatalities has to say. That's the one amendment I'll offer.
Board Member Taylor?
Yes, I just wanted to add to my earlier comments that, you know, the issue with being able to recruit and retain law enforcement and community distrust of law enforcement existed way before this report started to come out. All this report did was say, you know what, there's reasons why people are distrusting law enforcement. There's reasons why people don't feel safe with law enforcement. And here's the data to support the reasons why, so that no one can ignore it anymore. So I think that's the point of this report, is to show the trends, to show that this is why Black people feel racially discriminated against. This is because it's not a lie. It's not us just making up things, right? It actually has support in community data collected by the people who are doing the work in the community, doing the law enforcement work in the community. So, you know, I get the desire to want to say, well, you know, it's bad, but not that bad. Look at this good thing over here. The point is to examine and reevaluate, you know, the way law enforcement has come to be and has reinforced racism, even when good people try to do good things and make change. But you know, it's just this report isn't causing the problem, and and any impact it might have on the problem, I can't imagine as a bad one. The impact it would and should, and that I can see it having, is that it's saying, look, these people who are claiming these things in your community are not making this stuff up. You have to evaluate your policies. You have to evaluate how you are engaging with the community so that they can trust you, and there can be the bridging of this gap. So, you know, I mean, to just be like, well, let's talk about, you know, we always have to throw in a sprinkle of positivity, and it helps you ignore the very negative things that are going on. You say, well, we can't do everything, but we did this, so give us kudos for that. And that's not enough. even if you throw that in there, what the trend will continue to be is distrust of law enforcement until you say, we're going to stop looking at all the things we're doing correctly and stop asking for kudos for what we're doing correctly and start evaluating the things we're not doing correctly and how do we really make real change on the things we're not doing correctly. So, you know, while I can understand on a human level, and as a manager, as a former manager, you know, trying to have goals, you sometimes have to break the building all the way down and relay the foundation so you can build a stronger, better, more efficient building. And that's what I think this report needs to be doing, is it needs to be evaluating all the way down to the foundation and the soil that this thing has been built upon, because it's not been functioning. It's not been working for the entire amount of time it was created.
Sorry, could I just interject and make ask a question really? If the board would do me a slight favor, because on page 71, really starting with the second sentence on page 71 of the report, there is a discussion about racial disparities, reprioritization of traffic stops to focus on public safety and the positive effects. If you could look at that next paragraph that cites the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which I believe was given to us by the CHP, and look at that paragraph and let us know, maybe just take a couple of minutes and let us know what you would like us to change, because I think that particular paragraph is addressing the issues that you're all discussing right now. And to Steve's point, I believe that what you were citing before was just focusing on motor vehicle deaths and not traffic safety in general. But if there's things that you would all like us to clarify, if you could just take a moment and look at that, I think that might be the best, the most productive for us on our end in trying to, you know, reconcile these questions.
I could just reading the abstract from the study I cited, they study a mass layoff in Oregon State Police, February 2003, due solely to budget cuts. 35% of the troopers were laid off, dramatically reduced citation. Subsequent decrease in enforcement associated with significant increase in injuries and fatalities. So I think it's a study that finds a source of variation in enforcement and then traces it through to an impact on public safety. And I probably could find more just like this. And I think the problem is precisely on page 72. There's a very strong statement that there's no association between enforcement and traffic deaths and public safety, and I'm offering one. So, additionally, research indicates state patrol traffic stops are not associated with reducing motor vehicle deaths. And so I don't know if this is the right answer, that's the right answer, but research in general is, there's lots of people that forgive the metaphor, take a whack at the piñata trying to find the truth, and we summarize and try to think of what the central tendency of the evidence says. And there's other studies out there that find different things. So this is a very strong statement, and I guess the reason why when I read this I get concerned is, I can't imagine us deciding, well, let's just not enforce speeding, and then thinking about what the sort of cumulative consequences would be in a state of 40 million people. Or eliminating traffic stops for reckless driving or what have you. And one could take a statement like this and infer that we're advocating for that. And I don't think we are. I think we're advocating for fair policing, not necessarily eliminating policing. And so I guess maybe that's why I have a problem with this paragraph, and I did the last time I read it.
So if I can recommend maybe a way to address it, and I just lost the page I had up. without looking at the article, because I can't click through to the substance of the article that Steve sent, so I don't know what the nature of the stops were. They could have been stops that were for speeding at high rates, or I don't know what the basis of the stops that ceased as a result of the lack of enforcement. And we are specifically trying to target stops even that the policing agencies identify as pretextual, like stopping for taillight issues when you're actually looking for drunk drivers and actually that not yielding drunk drivers, etc. So I think we don't need to say this particular statement, but we could reference the existence of at least disparate research to say at the top of 72, well, like research is not clear that additional stops result in decreased, fatalities. Some evidence, some suggest that it is. Cite yours, perhaps. I don't know. I'd have to look at the content of the article, and others that it does not, and then cite this. But because I think fundamentally we're dealing with a presumption that more stops equals more safety, and I think we're problematizing that, and that's the point of this analysis, right? That like there are a category of stops, in particular pretext stops, that have very little relation to public safety, either finding evidence of more serious crimes or actually the safety of individuals on the street, and they're not even motivated by a desire to increase the safety on the street. So the officer stopping them doesn't think stopping someone for the crack in the taillight is actually going to make them safer, or the tree hanging from the rear view, that's an obstruction, is actually going to make anyone safer. But people do die as a result of stops that were initiated on those basis. So there's an actual public safety cost when you're talking about the person being stopped there, and there is a questionable, sometimes yes, sometimes no, relationship to other forms of public safety in terms of traffic enforcement. So I think just flagging that as like that it's more complicated than just stops equal safety is sufficient for the purposes of the discussion that we're trying to have here. To your point, see, we're not at this page, we're not trying to advocate for no stops. So it doesn't really matter if that's, that specific language is there.
So we could take that whole sentence out, or is that what you're suggesting, Melanie?
I think it's better to say that that the data shows both, right? That there's some data suggesting that stops are related to traffic fatalities. Again, I would need to look at the actual article that, Steve, I can't tell from just the site. But also that other research indicates that State Patrol stops not interested with this, and there's not blah, blah. And then cite the other thing. Because I think that's all we really need to let legislators know, or, policymakers know, is that the thing that you thought was true is not necessarily true. And so let's look more closely at all of the outcomes and all of the things that flow into that when you're making a decision here.
So then I think what we would then vote on would be to have the co-chairs, Melanie and Steve, work with DOJ to come up with language that would be in the spirit of this discussion as Melanie set forth.
That's fine.
Okay, moving. We were going to vote, but so I would like to make sure that we have like a clarification on those. If it's okay, I'm thinking it'd just be easier to vote on them as a package. We have to go through individually and take a roll vote, but if you guys could just raise your hand or nod and let me know if you think that the packages will work, or if you think okay. It seems like everyone thinks that okay. Can Melanie take it away if you can have someone make a motion?
Do we want, I know Board Member Armelin had his hand raised for quite some time. I want to make sure he doesn't have any additional comments that we want to fold into the vote. Go ahead.
Thanks. I don't have any comments on the prior discussion. My comment actually is on a different data point, and I purposely didn't want to like insert it earlier and kind of delay us even further, but I do want to mention it. So as I read the executive summary, I kind of felt like some of the data under the youth stops was kind of burying the lead. In fact, that's the most stunning disparity in the entire report. Like the most stunning disparity by far in the entire report, where you're talking about real numbers of difference, are the stops of kids. And you don't see that at all unless you really read down into the details. I'd like to see that be one of the bullet points up front in the executive summary. I mean, it's far more concerning, frankly, than some of the other points that are up there, to me and to my community members. I can tell you that for certain. Yeah, it's a minor point, but I think it's an important one. I'd really like to see those youth numbers put more up front, as I think they're frankly more concerning than a great deal of what's already there.
Thank you. And I know Andrea has your hand up, but did you have something to about the package of edits or any additional edits that we should be voting on? No, I think you're shaking your head. Okay, so let's go ahead and vote on those now then while folks are still here. So the three things that I have as edits to the report are mentioning the CHP, the fact that other agencies, including CHP, already use the probable cause standard. Delegating to Steve and I to work with DOJ to discuss the traffic impact piece in such a way that both acknowledges the existence of data that is going in both ways. And I said, oh, and a footnote regarding that defining what is a public safety stop is something that needs to be further examined. And I would caveat that we just leave it at that, like leave it open as to who does the examination, because I think it could be a legislative question. It could be something that we further engage in the board, and I'll just leave it open as to who is the examiner. So is that appropriate, Nancy, to vote on those? To present that as a vote? Oh, I move to vote on those as a package of edits. Is that, did I do it right?
Yes, thank you.
Member Ochoa, I just want to point out, I think that Member Guerrero had pointed out not to put CHP, just to put other California agencies. So I just want to make sure that I clarify that part.
I think, well, if maybe I can amend then to include CHP, because I do think, as we have in other places, we've highlighted policy changes that are of specific agencies. I think being able to say this agency in particular makes it more concrete and also gives folks someone to reach out to if they're interested in it. If folks object, I can eliminate it. I don't know if we could do both at the same time since there's like a pending motion.
I'm okay with that. I just wanted to make sure I clarified it.
Okay.
Yeah, that can be an amendment.
Okay. So then I'll amend it to include specific reference to CHP, but note that it's not all agencies listed, obviously.
Perhaps you could say including but not limited to CHP, if that's the concern.
Okay. Well, is that a specific amendment, Manju, or just a point of interest or point of, yes?
You can take it in whichever direction you'd like.
Well, because if it's a specific amendment, we need to have it second, and we're kind of getting into talking motions. Once there's a motion on the floor, we're supposed to vote on it so we don't get confused. So,
well, yes, then I will make the motion to amend the motion that Chair Ochoa made.
Okay, great. Do we have a second on the amendment?
You can second.
Okay. No further discussion. I will take the roll vote on those three edits. Member Taylor. I mean, yes, Member Taylor.
Sorry, I'll abstain.
Okay. Member Sierra.
Aye.
Member Ochoa.
Aye.
Member Raphael. Member Randolph.
Abstain.
And I don't think we heard you. I saw you wave, Steve. So member Raphael is a yay. Member Pridgeon.
Aye.
Member Ray.
Aye.
Member Kreiner.
Aye.
Member Guerrero.
Aye.
Member Kennedy.
Aye.
Member Kulkarni.
Aye.
Member Hawkins.
Aye.
And Member Armeline.
Aye.
Did I miss anybody? Okay, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. So we can move perhaps to public comment right now, unless any members of the board have any further pressing comments.
I did want to say, we looked at the data and that influenced how we went about updating the racial and identity profiling curriculum, which hasn't been updated for 20 years. And so the subcommittee did have that in mind so that we could get into the minds of officers through the training and help get some better outcomes in the community.
Thank you, Pastor Kennedy. So let's move into public comment. We'll do our normal, if you're able to raise your hand using the function, that'd be great, but we'll move through how we normally do through regions of California. Northern California, is there anyone who'd like to comment? Central California, is there anyone who'd like to comment? Southern California, I see Michelle Wittig. Go ahead, Ms. Wittig. We can't hear you if you're talking right now. I don't see you as muted, but we cannot hear you. So I'm going to just see if there's anyone else that would like to make a comment and return to you. Is there anyone else in Southern California who would like to comment? Okay, Ms. Wittig, I don't know what's going on with your sound. We cannot hear you. Unfortunately, we can't hear Ms. Wittig. If you'd like to maybe write something in the chat and someone could read it out for you, because I know you've had your hand raised a few times, and apologies for whatever reason we're not able to hear you. So next on the agenda is a short break. I don't know if folks want to just push through or have a little break for folks to push. I see nodding. I don't know if that was for pushing through or push through. Okay. Okay, sorry, I keep losing the agenda. So final action on RIPA report. Is that just a vote, Nancy, or is there something else?
Correct. That is final vote on the report, and as Allison mentioned, it's with the direction, you know, if people want to make the motion to direct the co-chairs to finalize that with the DOJ.
And I think I wanted to also make a motion, maybe this should be part of it, to again send the transmittal letter to the legislature as well as post. Once that's the final best practices is set, I think there still might be value in having letting folks have that in hard copy, even at the beginning, even at the beginning of the year, despite the briefing that's going to happen this year. And obviously for posts to get it, they would not get it otherwise. And maybe I can actually is it possible to make a motion that becomes our normal practice so that we don't have to vote on that every year, to just send the transmittal letters to those two bodies?
Motion away, please.
So I will make a motion for that. And then I see some folks. Well, I guess I see some hand raises. So let me address those first so that we're not in the middle of a motion. Manju?
Yeah, I wanted to just ask too if those are the only two bodies that we are sharing the report with, and if there would be some effort or opportunity to share it with some of the larger law enforcement entities throughout the state, LAPD, Sheriff's Office, San Francisco PD, whatever they are. I think there's an opportunity, and also to perhaps not simply share it with Post, but to offer a briefing to them as well. So I wanted to ask that.
Yeah, and you know, I think in terms of law enforcement agencies, you know, it is our hope that the California chiefs and the Cal sheriffs will push this out to their folks, which would get all of the law enforcement agencies. Would you like us to specifically send them a cover letter with those, you know, forwarding those best practice recommendations?
I think it would be beneficial. I mean, this is, you know, as many of us have said, an excellent report. So the more eyes on it, especially those of individuals who are in decision-making positions, to be able to change the policies and actions of their officers, I think would increase the impact of this report. And so that would certainly be my recommendation. Yes.
Okay, and I apologize, but we would add PORAC as well.
I wonder too, following that, if it makes sense, the legislative recommendations that are being pulled out, those are equally as applicable, I would assume, as the local legislative bodies. So like LA City Council could adopt the same kind of limitations on that would apply to LAPD, for example, as the state legislature could. So it might be useful, even whether we have that same letter or those same set of recommendations set down to them as well, or at least provided to folks so they can do it as like kind of local advocacy as well, to help folks address with their local legislative bodies.
And I would add to that oversight commissions. I know here in Los Angeles, we have the Sheriff's Oversight Commission. We also have the police, LAPD Police Commission. So those authority-making bodies, I think, as well, should receive a copy of the report.
Does any of that need to be in a motion, or can we just send it along? Nancy, I don't know what the process needs to be for that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is done through the listserv that I mentioned earlier, as well as the, you know, the, I can't remember the name that we call it, but it's basically the Friends of RIPA, like the people that have, you know, the community organizations that we've culled over the years that are most interested. I guess the problem, you know, we can't really we just don't have the resources to like do cover letters for every, you know, all of these organizations. And so, you know, we rely on you all to push them out to your networks and for us to, you know, send them out as well. You know, we're happy to, you know, add a few more, you know, organizations that the board feels is important, but you know, we just can't, you know, you know, create a big list and a special, like, you know, an email or a letter for every separate organization. I do think most of the people get them. And then, you know, of course, through the press release that the AG's office will do, it will be available online at the DOJ website. And, you know, the report does get significant coverage. Last year it was a little less coverage than normal. I think it's because, you know, we pushed it out on New Year's Eve in order to make the deadline. In years past, we've waited until later, you know, the first week of January, and that is our plan now. So I do think there will be, you know, a lot of coverage, more coverage than last year. So if there's a few more that you all want to have, you know, I think that's great. And in terms of post, you know, that was the focus of the letter to Post, was specifically to the Post Commission, and Member Guerrero had attended the Post Commission meeting to discuss the report last year.
I think it might be useful if the effort is already being done to create the like legislative cover letter, then if there's a way to create just like a generic version of like the heading or whatever, so that folks can use it as in their own local advocacy, and share that around, whether it's posted on the website, like here's a template letter for local elected bodies, or whether it's at least at minimum shared with all of us so that we can forward it along to folks. Since the letter is already created, I think we can do the effort of distribution, but I think it's viable because the more concise a thing is for most of these categories of folks, the more likely they're actually going to take some effort on it.
So you would like us to send those to the board? Is that?
Or post it on the website, just like the legislative version of the letter, that's so folks can like print it out and send, you know, do their individual advocacy with electeds, but somehow so that it gets to the document that's already essentially been created is shared with more folks so that they can use it at the local level as well.
Okay.
So I think we just need to vote on the letter then. I mean, I'm sorry, vote on the report and allowing the co-chairs to sign off on any wordsmithing, et cetera, in addition to what we already voted on in the last round. So I move to approve this year's report and direct and delegate to the co-chairs to work with DOJ to do any final wordsmithing. Do I have a second?
I will second that. Oh.
Second.
Thank you. So Nancy, did you need to do a roll call vote for that?
I do. I'm just going to go in the same order. Member Taylor.
Aye.
Member Sierra.
Aye.
Member Ochoa.
Aye.
Member Raphael.
Aye.
Member Randolph.
Nay.
Member Pridgen.
Aye.
Member Ray,
Aye.
Member Kreiner,
Aye.
Member Guerrero,
Aye.
Member Kennedy,
Aye.
Member Kulkarni,
Aye.
Member Hawkins,
Aye.
Member Armeline, and is Member Vieira still on?
Yes, I am.
And is your
I
vote
vote aye.
yes or no? Okay, great. And I apologize.
yes.
I did not know you were on earlier. Did you want to vote for the prior vote that we held? It was a unanimous with 2 abstentions, but I'm happy to record your vote.
I vote yes as well.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to check, is Dr. Armeline still on the line? Okay. The motion carries with 1 no.
Thank you all, and thank you for getting us across the line, DOJ. The last substantive item is the election of new co-chairs for 2023. I'm not sure exactly how we do that process. Do we take nominations, Nancy, or?
Yes, please. I can run this one.
Okay, thank you.
So that everybody can. I just would like to open the floor, but just briefly want to say that the board co-chair positions run for 1 year. They are selected by a majority of the board. We have 2 co-chairs now, which are Steve and Melanie. No matter how the vote goes today, I want to say that they've done an excellent job and have been wonderful co-chairs. And so at this time, I would just like to open the floor to the board members to make nominations. Steve.
I'd be happy to nominate Board Member Guerrero if she's willing.
Board Member Guerrero, do you accept the nomination?
I will accept, and I will simultaneously nominate another. Can I do that?
You can.
All right, I will nominate Chief Pridgen.
Great, thank you. Chief Pridgen, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I accept the nomination. Thank you.
Great. Any other? Pastor Kennedy.
I nominate DJ Kreiner.
Pastor Kreiner, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do accept.
And Member Kulkarni.
I have a question. Individuals can serve multiple terms, is that correct?
They can.
Okay, then I would like to nominate Co-Chair Achoya for a 2nd term.
Member Ochoa, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Any
that was
other?
my nomination too.
Okay. Any other nominations? All right. Well, this is exciting. I'm glad to see.
I think
so many
Angela
people.
Sierra had a nomination.
Oh, Angela.
Yes, I was going to also nominate Chief Pridgen. So
Great.
that he's been nominated.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Any final? Anybody else want to make a nomination? Okay. Hearing none, I will close that the nomination and I will go through each board member and ask you to select 2 people. It's going to be a little tricky, but I would ask that you select your 2 choices and I will record those. Member Taylor.
Can you, before you go do that, Nancy, can you restate who all the nominees were?
Yes, I can. So the nominees are Andrea Guerrero, Pastor DJ Kreiner, Chief Abdul Pridgen, and Melanie Ochoa. Member Taylor.
I vote for Ms. Ochoa as well as Chief Pridgen.
Member Sierra.
Yes, I vote for Chief Pridgen and Andrea Guerrero.
Member Ochoa.
I vote for Chief Pridgen and Andrea Guerrero.
Member Raphael.
I vote for Chief Pridgen and Board Member Guerrero.
Member Randolph.
I vote for Chief Pridgen and DJ.
Member Pridgen.
I vote for Board Member Guerrero. And can I vote for myself?
You can.
Okay, and myself.
If we know anything from elections, one vote may matter, right? Commissioner Ray.
Yes, I vote for Chief Pridgen and also Board Member Guerrero.
Pastor Kreiner.
Yes, I vote for the Chief Pridgen and Board Member Guerrero.
Member Guerrero.
I vote for Chief Pridgen and Melanie Ochoa.
Member Kennedy.
Ochoa and Kreiner.
Member Carney.
For co-chair Ochoa and also Officer or Chief Pridgen.
Member Hawkins.
I vote for Melody and for the chief.
Ronnie Viet, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'll vote for Guerrero and Ochoa.
And Dr. Armeline, are you on the line or? Okay. All right, give me 1 second. All right, let me double check. I want to make sure I don't want to get this wrong. Okay, so the votes are as follows: Chief Pridgen with 11 votes, Member Guerrero with 7 votes, Member Ochoa with 5 votes, and Member Kreiner with 2 votes. So congratulations to Chief Pridgen and Andrea Guerrero, who will be our new co-chairs next year. We at DOJ want, yes, congrats, thank you. we are all very excited, and this has been the most exciting vote I have ever experienced in my 7 years of working for the board. We did talk about with Melanie and Steve that they will continue on until mid-January in order to for cohesion in around doing the press. And so Andrea and Chief Pridgen, we will, there's no new swearing in or anything, but, in mid-January, you will officially be the new co-chairs of the board. And I want to thank, Melanie and Steve for their leadership. They're going to continue on with the board and continue on with their subcommittee positions. But I'm just want to thank you for taking this leadership role and leading us, into this year's report. I don't know if anyone else from DOJ staff has anything else that we need to discuss. I guess next steps probably. Steve and Melanie.
Are there further next steps for?
Yeah, I don't think we have any action items other than you will work a little bit on finalizing the report. Was there something, DOJ, did we miss a next step that we needed to vote upon?
No, this is Allison. Sorry, I can't turn my camera on for some reason. But no, we will work with Steve and Melanie to finalize the report in the next few weeks. We will also work to pull from the report the best practices and recommendations as we did last year, and make the edits that you all have voted on. And then once the report is finalized and published, we will then work with the co-chairs on the transmittal letters and work on a template letter as well. So we really appreciate everyone's hard work this year. And as Nancy mentioned, also, we will be in touch with all of you to schedule a meeting with the board to discuss the regulations. So the new regulations. So we'll be in touch with all of you about that. But thank you all for your hard work. We really appreciate it. There we go.
All right.
Great, thank you all. So I think we can adjourn the meeting. Oh wait, Manju has, I see a hand up from.
Yes, sorry, just very quickly. I did want to touch upon a point I had made earlier, which is around the talking points. And, I think that, given the, my understanding of the communications field, I think an executive summary is not actually talking points. And I think for, those folks who have done this kind of work, message discipline is actually pretty key when one talks to the media and to reporters. And so if there is a way in which the communications department at DOJ can be involved, I also would just otherwise suggest that only the co-chairs be allowed to or encouraged to talk to media. I think we've seen in just this meeting alone that we actually have very divergent views of even the report that we voted on. And so I think it would be my recommendation to both to either issue talking points or to limit those who are encouraged to speak on the board's behalf. Again, with very specific criteria about what they would say regarding this report. Is that something?
That's a question to,
yeah, Allison or Nancy can address.
I mean, I guess I would think that this is something that we would need a discussion and a motion. I would just say there have been members who are not co-chairs who have provided, excellent, interviews with the press. Dr. Armelin last year, gave a very good interview. And so I would be reluctant, from my perspective, but, it's not my decision, it's the board's decision. So I would just say that there have been, very positive, the more that the word gets out there, I think is good, but I think that's up for the board to discuss and vote on if you all want to have a policy like that, because currently that is not what we've done.
I think some of this is the distinction of when we're speaking just on behalf of the board and versus behalf on our organizations or individual capacities, because even before I was a member of the board, I was asked to comment on RIPA data for various reasons, right? And I think maybe some guidance in language that we should use from DOJ in terms of making clear that we're speaking as we're a member of the board, but we're speaking actually on behalf of ACLU or on behalf of Melanie Ochoa, as whatever kind of capacity that we're actually being interviewed in. What is sufficient language that we could use to make that distinction, to both acknowledge we are a member of the board, we did vote on this thing, but our comments are not necessarily on behalf of the board. Is there language that would allow us to kind of preface our that you could suggest that we could preface our conversations with media with that, if it's so that we don't have to worry about any disparate, comments being made that are attributed to the board as a whole versus the individual board member in their whatever capacity they're actually being interviewed for. Would that address your concern, Manju?
Yes, I think it would.
Andrea, did you have, or Nancy, if you want to respond to that, or
Andrea had hand raised. Andrea had some experience in this regard, so I'd love to hear what you have to say, Andrea.
Yeah, I mean, I've given media comment at the request of DOJ as both a RIPA board chair and as a board member, and I concur with Nancy that it is it's a good thing when we have more voices, especially in local media markets where San Diego media outlet is going to want to talk to a San Diego member, so on and so forth. So I think what perhaps could be helpful is if we asked of the co-chairs to work with DOJ to just put together a few bullet points, talking points, and separate as Board Chair Ochoa suggests, when you're talking on behalf of the board, this is how you begin, and these are the 3 to 5 points that you would make. And if you're speaking on behalf of yourself, just be sure to preface that your comments are in your individual capacity, not on behalf of the board. So that we would be, so we would be allowing for any board member to speak, but we would all be on the same script regarding the board report, and anything further beyond the report, analysis of the report, or future work needed, would be prefaced by, this is my own personal opinion.
I'm fine with that. I don't think, do we need a vote for this, Nancy, or can we just include that into there'll be an additional product with the release of the report that will be circulated to board members?
Yeah, if we're just keeping the policy as a status quo, then we do not need to vote.
Okay.
Is there any further comment or discussion, or if Manju, if you want to circle back to anything?
No, I appreciate it. I just, I continue to believe that, there's a media savviness that we want to have the impact and have the report out, and, once again, the message discipline around what's shared. And so, when there are talking points that are offered by individuals with expertise in communications, I think that works to the benefit of the entity over just simply reading off parts of an executive summary, which I don't think are helpful to reporters. And I think our data also are pretty dense. And so to really be able to highlight what's of greatest import is important. As Dr. Armelin mentioned, like there's certain key things that we want to make sure to get out there. And that's not 100 different pieces of data that are in the report. Thank you.
So I don't know, is there any capacity for DOJ comms to work with us to come up with some talking points that can be shared? And obviously you can go beyond that, like we were discussing, but is there, I don't know what their capacity is or what their role is.
Yeah, I can't give the press office instructions. They are part of the executive office of the Attorney General, but there will be a press release, and the CREST team can work on providing something along that line.
Nancy, this is Damon. I was just going to share, we can touch base with the comms team to see what level of capacity and commitment they can have to this effort. And I'll loop that through, to bring Nancy into that conversation so that we can report that back to the board.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Damon.
Okay, thank you both for that. Is there, Brian, any further comments by any folks? We can adjourn today's meeting and enjoy your holiday, folks.
I just have to also one more time thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a happy 2023, happy New Year, happy holidays, and look forward to working with you all again in the new year.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.